What is up, weather enthusiasts? I'm your host, Pat's Path Predictor. Let's get right into the weather. Alright, so here's the situation we have for you, ladies and gentlemen. We have Hurricane Kirk currently over in the Atlantic Ocean right now as a Category 4 hurricane. Tropical Storm Leslie not far behind, expected to get to hurricane strength later down the road. But the Gulf Coast does need to watch out once again, as finally we have our area of interest. We have a tagged area of interest once again in the Gulf Coast. We've been watching it for several days. This system looks like it's going to be coming, it was coming off of the Eastern Pacific, and now it is expected to potentially organize and develop as it approaches Florida. So we're going to go ahead and dive right into all those things very quickly. And we'll go ahead and start with Hurricane Kirk right now. And we also have another area of interest that was just tagged by the National Hurricane Center out here in the Atlantic Ocean right now. I was just refreshing, and holy crap, things are continuing to blow up in the main development region. But here's what we have going on with Hurricane Kirk at this current point. Maximum sustained winds are currently at 140 miles per hour, pressure of 939 millibars. Looking back at the archive, it got up to 145 miles per hour. Held at 145 and slowly weakened a little bit this morning. The next advisory will be coming out very soon. So hopefully we'll get some more information. But Kirk is a small storm, by the way. Its hurricane force winds only extend outward 35 miles from the center, and its tropical storm force winds only extend outward 195 miles from the center. Maximum sustained winds, once again, are near 140, and so those hurricane force winds are only concentrated in a small area, just for context right there. It's currently moving at 12 miles per hour to the northwest at 315 degrees. And here's what we have with the discussion right here. Satellite appearance from Kirk is a little less impressive than it was 6 hours ago, as the eyes become somewhat cloud-filled and the convective cloud tops have warmed a little. Recent microwave imagery suggests that the hurricane may be starting an eyeball replacement cycle with an outer convective band wrapped around 3/4 the way around the eyeball. The various objective and subjective satellite intensity estimates have trended downward, and based on a combination of these estimates and the initial intensity has been reduced to 120 knots, which is 140 miles per hour. The wind radii has been tweaked based on the recent ASCAP pass. Fluctuations in intensity are likely during the next 24 hours due to the expected eyeball replacement cycle. After that, Kirk should encounter increasing southwesterly shear and move into cooler sea surface temperatures, which should cause a steady weakening. Extratropical transition, which is likely to begin in the next 60 to 72 hours and complete by 96 hours, with Kirk being a strong extratropical cyclone over the northeastern Atlantic. The new intensity forecast follows the general trends of intensity guidance, and it's closest to the GFS model during the extratropical stage. Even though Kirk is expected to recurve over the open Atlantic, its strong intensity and increasing size will result in large ocean swells that will propagate far away from the hurricane. These swells will likely increase the risk of dangerous surf and rip currents across the Leeward Islands beginning later today, Bermuda and the Greater Antilles by Saturday, and much of the United States East Coast, Atlantic Canada, and the Bahamas by Sunday, and the Azores by Monday. For information, go look to your local weather office. Gradual weakening is expected down to 130 miles per hour in the next 12 hours, as it is undergoing its eyeball replacement cycle. If we go ahead and show you the cone pulled up right here, Kirk is expected to head towards Europe as an extratropical cyclone towards the United Kingdom and France. So you're going to want to pay very close attention to that as it moves closer and closer to there, because this could impact a lot of areas over there, and we will have to pay attention to it down the road. Let's go ahead and show you Tropical Storm Leslie right here. Tropical Storm Leslie is currently a 65 mile per hour tropical storm. It's currently moving to the west-northwest at 7 miles per hour. Its location is 10 degrees north, 33 degrees west, and is expected to start making a turn to the soon and head to the northwest as a hurricane. So we're going to have to watch that very closely. Here's the public advisory with that right here. Maximum sustained winds have increased to near 65 miles per hour. Where were they at before? Let's go ahead and pull up the archive. They were at 60 miles per hour this morning. They might get up to 70 miles per hour by the end of the day, so we're going to have to pay attention to it. Pressure's 996 millibars. So here's the discussion that we have right here. Recent microwave imagery depicted that Leslie is continuing to become better organized and is trying to develop an inner core. Bursts of deep convection have continued to develop mainly on the southern semicircle as the system is still battling some deep layer northeasterly shear. This is mainly because of Kirk. Right here, Kirk's outflow has been impacting Leslie quite a bit, and that's why it's been struggling out there, just to give you some information with that. Given the improved convection pattern with the subject Dvorak intensity estimates, they have been increased with the cycle to 55 knots with both TAF-B and SAB, and the initial intensity is now set to 55 knots. Northeasterly shear should begin to decrease later today as Hurricane Kirk continues to pull away from the system. Strengthening is then forecast for the next 2 to 3 days. With warm sea surface temperatures, upper level divergence, and low deep layer shear. The intensity guidance, especially the peak, has come down on the cycle, and that was a combination of a few factors. In about 3 days, Leslie is forecast to move over the cold wake of Kirk and encounter increasingly dry air, mid-level shear, and an upper level pattern, which would become also became a little less diffluent. This should cause the intensity of Leslie to plateau throughout the end of the forecast period. NHC intensity forecast follows these trends and is slightly lower than the previous forecast guidance, but lies near the higher end of the intensity guidance. So that's definitely something to pay attention to, and that's definitely something interesting. I did fine with that. But now we have 2 more areas of interest to talk about, and we'll start with the Gulf Coast because that poses the greatest threat. So here we go. A trough of low pressure over the western Gulf of Mexico is producing widespread shower and thunderstorm activity. A broad area of low pressure is expected to develop from the system over the southwestern or south central Gulf of Mexico during the next day or two. An additional subsequent development is possible while the low moves slowly eastward or northeastward. A tropical or subtropical depression or storm could form during the early to middle part of next week if the low remains separate from the frontal boundary that is forecast to extend across the Gulf of Mexico next week. Regardless of tropical developments, locally heavy rains could occur over portions of Mexico during the next few days and over the Florida Peninsula late this week onto next week. 50% probability in the next 7 days, 10% in the next 48 hours. If you're tuning in from Tampa Bay, if you're tuning in from Southwest Florida, if you're tuning in from the west coast of Florida who have already been impacted by Helene, you're going to need to watch this very closely. Mainly because even if the system doesn't develop and remains like an open wave, it's still going to produce a ton of rainfall, and you already got a lot of rainfall from Helene previously. Tampa Bay got a lot of flooding from the storm surge. You do not need more rainfall on top of that, because that's going to cause some very severe flash flooding in areas that were already really badly impacted by Hurricane Helene. I've been watching the news. I've been keeping updated on what's been going on in Georgia and North Carolina especially, and even in South Carolina and parts of Florida. It's been very tragic over there. Over 200 people have tragically passed away. Once again, I offer my condolences to those who've been affected, and my heart, thoughts, and prayers go out to everyone that has been affected by Helene. This has been the worst disaster that the mainland United States has faced since Hurricane Katrina in 2005 in terms of death toll, and I think the damage cost could exceed over $100 billion once it's all said and done. It's already estimated to be $20 billion in Florida alone. We're not even counting the fact that Georgia, we're not even counting South Carolina, we're not even counting Tennessee, North Carolina, Virginia, those areas right there. And we need to get as much help as we can. I know the response has been relatively slow as of late. It's been kind of disgraceful how slow it's been, but I have been kind of giving a little bit of leeway. I have been kind of relaxing a bit in terms of my criticism, mainly because the infrastructure is so wiped out, especially in western North Carolina. I've been kind of holding back my criticism and giving it a little time because that I understand. Interstate's been washed out. Asheville is still, a lot of areas around Asheville are without communication. I understand that, but we need to get to these people sooner rather than later. as we see this death toll continue to pile up, it gets more and more tragic. But anyway, my rant aside, let's go ahead and move on to this area of interest in the far eastern tropical Atlantic. Here we go. A tropical wave is expected to move westward from the coast of Africa on Monday or Tuesday. Some development of the system is possible thereafter as it moves westward or west-northwestward across the eastern tropical Atlantic. 0% chance in the next 48 hours, 20% in the next 7 days. The fact that they are already tagging this, and this is 3 days out from this entering the Atlantic, and then a couple days afterward from developing. Let's go ahead and go to the earlier one. This was just tagged, just to give you some information on that. This was just tagged out here in the Atlantic. So the fact that they're already tagging this several days out, that should tell you how confident the NHC is that something is going to happen. And we need to pay very close attention to this and take this very, very seriously. So with that being said, and with my NHC analysis done, I know it's 10 minutes in the video, and a lot of you are probably going, Patrick, come on, man, you're talking about the NHC too much. What is the satellite looking like? Let's give you some satellite presentation to kind of give you some context. Let's go ahead and start with Hurricane Kirk very briefly. Here's what we have with Hurricane Kirk. I'm noticing the eye wall replacement cycle starting to kick up a little bit on satellite, but it does look, at least according to the satellite imagery I do have, and I want to also take a look at this at the DAPIA website for Kirk as well, just to kind of take a look. That's Leslie. Let's see what Kirk is doing right here, because I want to see how this eyewall replacement cycle is going to evolve. Because, okay, yeah, I can definitely see the double eyewall structure on satellite right there. My main thing is it going to be one of those merger eyewall replacement cycles where only part of the eye merges back and the rest of it and the eyewall just kind of reattaches itself relatively easily? Or is it going to be one of those full eyewall replacement cycles where you ultimately have a situation where the system just kind of undergoes that, the outer eyewall overtakes the inner one, the inner eyewall gets choked out, and it results in a massive push and a massive expansion of the wind field, similar to what we've seen with typical tropical cyclones like Sam in 2021. I told you guys Kirk was going to be a case study, and boy, I was not wrong with that. But I am seeing those eyewall replacement cycle features starting to pop up. It'll be curious to see what the eye is going to ultimately do at the end of the day. But regardless of that, that's something you're going to want to pay attention to. I am curious. I want to check if hurricane hunters have been out in Kirk recently. No, they have not. So it's all been satellite imagery right here. So that's something you're going to want to pay attention to. You can look at it on satellite. It definitely is showing that eyewall replacement cycle structure, but still a nice structure regardless that Kirk has been producing. Let's go ahead and next show Tropical Storm Leslie. Tropical Storm Leslie has been pretty interesting. You're seeing that huge burst of convection finally starting to blow up and finally starting to get its act together, as well as increased areas of rotation. I do want to pull up Leslie over here on the DAPIA website just to kind of get some better context with this, but yeah, it's definitely starting to get its act together. Shearing is evident. I will tell you that right now. Shearing is absolutely evident. By the way, seizure warning for those who are prone to flashing lights. However, the convection has been firing off. You have SSTs that are still really good. All this is things are really starting to get go the system's way. By the way, this estimates that that Leslie is a 70-mile-per-hour tropical storm and will likely be updated to 70 miles per hour in the next few minutes or so. But regardless of that, this could be a hurricane by tonight. Pressure of 993 millibars. What's the wind field on that once again? Let's go ahead and pull that up and pull up the public advisory. Wind field is only 60 miles from the center, so it's already a really low pressure, 993 millibars for a 65-mile-per-hour tropical storm. Usually you'd see pressures around 996, 997 for a storm of that strength, but then again, this is 70 miles per hour, so it's a little bit on the lower side of the pressure, but it is in that standard deviation, so ultimately, I'm not going to give too much flack or anything like that, but the main stuff I am paying attention to, obviously, other than Kirk and Leslie, is the area of interest in the Gulf of Mexico. Let's go ahead and pull that up. This is where the AOI has been tagged recently. You're seeing those areas of showers and thunderstorms starting to fire off. starting to build up a little bit. It's going to take some time for this tropical wave and these thunderstorms to organize and develop. I want to make that perfectly clear. It's not going to do it overnight tonight. If that were the case, that'd be some really bad news, but it's not going to happen tonight. It's going to take some time to do it. It probably won't organize until it gets to the central Gulf of Mexico and then start to intensify from there. We're going to have to pay attention to it. I do want to pull up the water vapor imagery. Yeah, the Gulf of Mexico is pretty moist for this. And you're starting to see you're starting to see at least a little broad area of rotation a little bit on satellite. However, you got to pay attention to other factors. There is a little bit of shear to its north of it. The shear needs to lift before the system can start to ramp up and develop, but it has plenty of moist air and plenty of warm water to really organize and develop and really ramp up and do all the things that it needs to. So we're going to have to watch it. Next thing we're paying attention to as well is the area in the Eastern Atlantic. This right here, I believe, is the tropical wave in question. It's currently nearing Mali. It's currently about to enter the area right there. It's currently north of the Gold Coast of Africa right now. That is expected to move into the tropical Atlantic in the next couple of days. The fact that they're already starting to tag an area of interest on this, and this is 3 days away from moving out in the Atlantic, is pretty concerning to me, because the NHC, what they're telling us right there is they're pretty confident something is going to happen. They just don't know what. And the fact that we're already seeing the MDR explode in October and late September, about a month behind a schedule, is pretty interesting. I told you guys it was going to be a backlog season. I wasn't wrong, so there's that. But we got to pay attention to that. I do want to check a water vapor as well. Plenty of moist air, and I'm not really that surprised. Honestly, primarily because you have Kirk over here, you have Leslie over here, you have all this moisture in the Eastern Main Development Region that the system can work with. But I will say the one thing that could limit this system from developing is if Leslie's outflow gets large enough, and if the outflow becomes wind shear that ultimately helps kind of choke the system out a little bit. It won't do it that much because it's still a small system right now, but we'll have to pay attention to it and we'll have to keep a very close eye on that. And let's go ahead and pull up some model runs to kind of see where all these systems are going to go, because we're having a very active month right now. So we'll go ahead and start with the European. European has the system, has Kirk moving out more, has Leslie really ramping up and organizing, but in terms of the Gulf of Mexico system, it has it organizing and developing actually relatively quickly as it moves towards the Yucatan Peninsula, just north of that, potentially gets down to hurricane strength. Pressure gets down to 977 millibars. That's good for a high-end Cat 1, low-end Category 2 hurricane, and then makes landfall near the Tampa Bay region as a hurricane, and then moves through Florida, and then enters the Atlantic right there. Most likely becomes extratropical at that current point, but we will have to pay attention to that. Also watching this area of interest out here in the Atlantic. Generally going to stay out to sea right there, although there is a building ridge that's going to start coming up that could push it further to the west and potentially towards the Antilles and the United States right there. But that trough is something you're going to want to pay attention to right there and see if this will drift out to sea or get pushed further to the west. Next run we'll show you is the GFS as well. GFS has been pretty interesting. GFS has the system really organizing and developing in the Gulf of Mexico and then makes landfalls around a 985 millibar system near the Tampa Bay region, a little bit further to the south this time than before. And then you have Leslie getting up to really strong strength around Category 2 intensity. The GFS, interestingly enough, does drop the development of this area of interest in the main development region. So I am curious to see what their thinking is in regards to that. But regardless of that, it has Kirk becoming an extratropical cyclone and really affecting the United Kingdom and northern France right there. So any of my British and French viewers, you're going to want to pay attention to that. Next model we'll show you is the Canadian run. Canadian's been pretty interesting. Canadian has the system organizing a bit further to the south in the Gulf of Mexico, making landfall in the Yucatan as a hurricane, and then moving out in the Gulf, organizing and developing even more before heading towards Florida. I'm going to be honest with you. That's the only run that has it indicating a Yucatan landfall, and I'm not exactly buying that due to the steering conditions. Like this high pressure system, this ridge isn't that strong to push it that far south, so that's why I'm not exactly buying it that much. And then you have this system out here in the Atlantic kind of staying out to sea and doing its own thing right there. So ultimately, very active weekend ahead. We're going to have to pay close attention to a lot of things down the road, and we will continue to keep you updated here on the Pat's Path Predictor channel. Ladies and gentlemen, that'll be it for today's video. Be sure to leave a like and subscribe to the channel if you are new. It helps us out, helps us get more people engaged with weather. If you want to come talk with us about the tropics, be sure to join our Discord server, Storms United. We talk about it all the time in there. The link to that will be in the end screen. Also, shout out to Daniel as an official sponsor of the Pat's Path Predictor channel. He's on my Patreon. He's an official sponsor on there. So if you'd like to support the channel more directly, be sure to join the Pat's Path Predictor Patreon. It's the first link in the description down below. And with that being said, have a wonderful day, guys. Stay safe.